Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third What Works webinar of 2022. We're really pleased to be here this morning. I've got two of my colleagues here, and the topic is one that I think has been a hotbed of discussion among all educators. So we're really pleased to present to you what's around the corner, unpacking the OECD Learning Compass 2022-2030. And we're looking at a couple of other frameworks as well. And what do educators have in their toolbox to effectively traverse the next decade? And while we do that, I think I'm going to request my colleagues to introduce themselves using a 21st century trait that they embody, because knowing the two of them, there are plenty they embody, but let's see what they have up their sleeve. Sharda. You're on mute. Can you move the slide on, Sharda?
Yeah, hold on. I'm able to mute myself now. Thank you. Yeah, so good afternoon, friends. This is me, yes, with two of my favorite characters from childhood. And these are the two characters that have taught me the most important skill, and that's critical thinking, problem solving. And I have enjoyed watching them in a way that lifelong learning has become an innate trait for me throughout my life till date. And I think I'm going to be a lifelong learner for good. And learning not just by self, but from my own daughter. As much as iPhone updates its various apps, even taking a good selfie is what my daughter teaches me. The most of the recent features in the camera. And learning continues for me, with my colleagues in the field of education that we are, from the peers, from our colleagues, from their classroom experiences as well. And that's how I believe, the learning continues and the journey is on for us.
Thank you, Sharda. Sharda, do you mind sharing your designation before Sydney introduces herself?
Yeah. So working at GEMS Modern Academy as the Dean for Curriculum in the school. This is my 11th year in the school. Thank you.
Sharda. Sydney?
Thank you, Mrs. Morak. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I thought about which one of these 21st century skills to select for myself, and I zeroed in on cultural competence. And I think the reason is very, very personal. I was, in retrospect, thinking back to growing up as a child, where this was not a educational catchphrase, not something that is trending today. But my parents took time to educate me, to give me the exposure to different demographics, cultures, people. And the reason I chose those two pictures in particular is because I was telling my colleagues, I had never even heard about, apartheid or the Armenian genocide in my entire school career. It was only because of our interactions with people that we knew Calcutta has a great Armenian population. My parents' interactions with people that I was able to understand these things and then eventually travel to those countries and learn about them myself. And I think cultural competence is so much more important than it ever was before, which is why I chose to introduce myself with it. I'm one of two vice principals at Modern and very happy to be here this afternoon.
Thank you, Sydney. And, to all the participants attending, we will be fielding questions at the end. I also want to share that we loved some of the questions that you've already posted in, and Ms. Maya shared that with us. And you'll see many of those questions will be answered along the way. That leaves me to introduce myself. I'm Nargis Kambata, the principal of GEMS Modern Academy. And I think the 21st century skill I've chosen is judgment and decision making. And that's why I've picked the two colleagues that really embody everything about 21st century learning. So why are we discussing the future of education today? I think that's the question, the moot question of the day. And just this morning, I was talking to a grade 4 student and I smiled when, she said, I'm in grade 4. Do you remember me? I met you at the tea house. And I said, yes, I do. And I said, do you know you're going to graduate in 2030? And I smiled because the OECD 2030 compass that you see right behind Sydney, I think he's positioned himself very strategically. So it reminded me of the 2030 compass, and I said, this is the young lady who is going to graduate and who's transformational competencies we will be talking about, later or right through the day. And I think the pandemic has, taught us so many things. We're not going to dwell on the pandemic at all, lest you say, oh no, and not another one of the pandemic stories. But I think, we've become more reflective as practitioners. We've become more agile in our thinking. What really matters, we're able to distill that. And I think, we're able to take an educated guess, not just, and I say educated guess because we rely on research. Of course, we rely on research. More importantly, on trend analysis. And while we try to be inclusive, and this whole concept of equity has come into sharp focus during the pandemic. So, it is really important the way we are guiding. What are we guiding our children towards? Sydney, what do you think?
Thanks. So, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I must preface this by saying we are not educational soothsayers. We can't see into the future. We don't have a crystal ball. But like Nargish said, we can make, informed, educated conjecture at this point. But before I go down that path, this has been, what you're seeing on your screen, has been in the news and all the rage over the last couple of days. And we were reflecting on how science fiction-y, if I could use that term, it looks to us. But science fiction is today's reality. What we termed as science fiction is today's reality. And I was telling my colleagues this morning that while rewatching Black Panther, the movie that became so famous and won the Oscar last year, I came across a line, and it says, when tensions exist between the status quo or the standard order and changing realities, it is the changing realities that sort of surface and win. And I think if we were to contextualize that to our educational landscape, we are at a position where education is at a cross section of both evolution as well as revolution. So gradual steps towards changing the future, but transformative and exponential growth, if you look at it, coming slowly. And revolutions take time. They come to us slowly and sometimes unexpectedly. But I wanted to talk about the future heroes of the Museum of the Future for a second, because it will give context to some of the slides that come later in the presentation. So as part of one of the exhibits at the museum, they have something called the Future Heroes, which is an experiential learning opportunity for children to go through 3 phases. So they design for a problem, they ideate around possible scenarios and solutions, and they come to the outcome that they have prepared for. And really, that in itself is an indicator of where education and what kind of skills children will require going forward. The Museum of the Future has this experiential learning opportunity for children, and it's important that we consider it for schools as well. But I want to touch on something that Nargish talked about, making educated conjecture and guesses using trend analysis. And 2 examples come to mind. One, some years ago, when gaming became all the rage, Minecraft for education, Google Education, all of those tools were developed. We took onto it. I was an early adopter of Minecraft in the classroom, and then it sort of went into a lull. But if you look at where we are now and the kind of skills children can develop through game-based education or gamification of learning, and then take it forward into employability skills, that's an incredible growth that we have seen. So the trend does suggest that tools come to us, they go into a lull perhaps, but they will re-emerge. And I think the takeaway for me and you is, being able to identify those opportunities and then investing in them and committing to them so that we can leverage them later. Sharda, you had another example you'd like to share?
Yes, Sydney, thank you for that. I think the one other example that comes to mind is the one about textbooks. Because years ago, they did say that textbooks would become, or books would become obsolete. But there has been a phase out of books and textbooks in schools and various curricula across the countries, but it has not got completely out of the school campus. But yes, we've got probably much more enhanced and enriched digital versions of books, with having similar phasing out of the books in the future.
Thank you, Sharda. So I think that leads us very nicely, the next segue into, I can't see the presentation, Sharda. Can you expand on it, or is it only my computer playing up?
No, it's on, Nargish.
All right, it is perfect. There, I've got it. So when we talk about just picking up from where Sydney and Sharda left off from, to our colleagues who are listening in, I do just want to share what our roles are going to be. I'm supposed to be just moderating this event, and our erudite colleagues will are really expanding on this. But I wanted to talk to this slide in particular, where there is a race between technology and education. And it is truly and I wanted to focus on where the areas of social pain exist. As you can see, when you have technology and education going parallel to begin with, it's fine. But when technology supersedes and moves at a faster pace than education, that's when social pain is experienced. And we found that, as we're going along, well, education caught on and it moved on, and that's when prosperity really is experienced. However, if you move to the right end of this graph, you'll see that, and I suspect because of the pandemic, really, whatever future educational trends have been put in place has grown exponentially. And I want you to roll your eye over the top section where you're seeing prosperity again. And that is truly when the future technology and future education cross paths and education is soaring upwards. I think that is when you experience the prosperity again. The reason why we decided to put this slide on is we often say that you cannot replace the teacher in the classroom. Of course, you cannot. If you are leveraging technology, they say the teacher who teaches is always going to be in demand, who teaches well and understands her students. But the teacher who teaches well using technology is really the one who's going to make all the difference in today's generation. And it is our children who are compelling us to think radically differently. And as we go along, you'll see that the reason why there's been so much of change is because our children are 21st century learners. We're still existing in 19th century classrooms with teachers who've had 20th century educations themselves. And then we're teaching our digital natives who are literally born with an iPad as an extension of their arm. So what guides our north really? What is it that we're looking towards in terms of constructing what skill set our children need? 10 years from now, what does learning look like? And I think, Sharda, you attended the Kadwa PISA forum, the competency forum, the global competency forum, and you had some really smart takeaways from what Dr. Abdul Latif Al-Shamsi had to say.
Yes, thank you, Nargis. So friends, Dr. Shamsi kind of alluded us towards the ways in which their institutions are looking at the pandemic reflections and then therefore deciding what should be the post-pandemic takeaways or preparations for this interconnected youth, because they realized that there are so many takeaways as institutions, as stakeholders, as policymakers, that we can re-engineer our campuses, because that's how the engagement levels of our learners can get better, get enriched. And for them, it was more of attracting or making sure that students come to campus to continue learning. So they have come up with the idea of the hyper hybrid campus, which is more like a mall-like campus where they will offer unique learning experiences, for this Gen Z generation of our students and learners for the 21st century. It's more about providing them those kind of opportunities that will kind of have an outcome of the persona 4.0 that they're defining with the digital skill sets, the professional skill set, or the entrepreneurial skill sets, by giving them such kind of learning activities and tasks within the curriculum, and thereby leading into digital learning and the professional learning. So this kind of leads us to think, so if this is how higher college is going to be redefined, or the campuses are going to be redefined in the UAE, so what does schooling or K-12 schools look like for us in the future? And also, what are those skills that we probably need to emphasize more often within the school itself? So I think Ms. Kamara would like to allude us to the kind of skills that we are looking forward to in the future, in the next decade.
Thank you, Sharda. When we talked about the, the mall-like campus, we sat up and said, really, are higher institutions going to look like malls in the future? But who knows what the morrow holds? As Sydney says, we don't have a crystal ball. We can just make educated guess. So, what are the top 10 future skills? In 2015, this was a set of skills that were defined, and we saw that if you look at creativity, it was at number 10, but it was still on that list. If you looked at critical thinking, it was at number 4. If you looked at judgment and decision making, it was at number 8. But come to 2020, and you see that where does creativity, where has it jumped? It's jumped right up to number 3 on the list. But you look at 2030, I do want to share that these are surveys conducted by two different, or these are future skills put out by two different sets of fora. So one is the World Economic Forum, and the other is Pearson, really. But the comparison is what we want to draw your attention to. So while creativity jumped up to number 3, really, and judgment and decision making at number 7, but and emotional intelligence was at number 6, and jumping to 2030, well, creativity has disappeared right from that list completely, and we do believe that it's been replaced by fluency of ideas and active learning and and new age thinking on that score. But judgment and decision making has jumped right at the top. But teachers, I want to draw your attention to the absence of emotional intelligence in the 2030 skill. And that, when we reflected internally, we said, that's huge. And why is it not featuring on that 2030 list? And that's where the discernment of any educator will tell you how important it is, to nurture emotional intelligence in our students. And later on, I think Ms. Stephanie Price is going to come in with an invaluable opportunity for our students. This is not a spoiler alert. When she comes in, she will share with you what's going to happen. But I think just coming back to my point on emotional intelligence, I think we've got to be discerning in terms of how whatever the data says, whatever the trend analysis is, but we know what the ground reality is. And I think we know then what to play the emphasis on, in spite of, all the predictors that that are being shared. I'd also like.
Sorry,
yes.
If I just come in and make a point that I wanted to add, I promised myself I wouldn't use the word pandemic too often, but I think the last 2 years have showed us both our strengths and our vulnerabilities as well. And look at how teachers adapted. Look at the new skill set they've sort of developed over time as well. And the reason that resonates with me, and it's linked to what Sharda talked about, because learning environments are going to become a focus in the future. But in preparation for this session, I read a UNESCO Futures of Education blog post where they listed some pandemic takeaways. And I think a lot of them echoed our own takeaways as educators here in the Middle East. So, human interaction, technology, learning beyond walls, the use of resources, all of those things featured prominently on that blog. But I think, to your point, well-being and emotional intelligence featured very highly on that blog, along with teacher expertise and development. I think while we're so focused on the skills children need to imbibe and develop going forward, understanding and acknowledging that carrying teachers along that journey and equipping them to facilitate that is also an important point for us to sort of mull on as we go through this session.
Thank you, Sydney. And teachers, if I may ask you in the chat, if you could indicate what were your takeaways from, or what were your learnings from the pandemic? Not the usual, list that one would make, but genuinely on reflection, what were some of the things that, resonated deeply with you? And as a teacher, what do you feel that, how have you equipped your students? I know every one of you have risen to the occasion, and you were the true heroes with the capes. Many schools had these beautiful drawings with teachers as heroes and children as heroes. But what truly were your takeaways from these future skills that you see, right in front of you that are coming? What is missing? I found emotional intelligence missing. Sydney alluded to well-being, which in the OECD compass, it clearly shows how it is important.
Ms. Kamara?
Yes, I seem to have logged off. Am I still audible?
Yes,
I can hear you, Naresh.
Okay. Sorry, I don't, my computer seems to be playing up here. So if you can go to the next set of slides, I think what we're looking at here are 4 models, clear models for 21st century skills. The first one was the partnership for 21st century skills that was put out there. While we're not going to be discussing the first 2 sets of models, I think Sydney and Sharda will walk you through the 3x3 model, and that Punya Mishra and his team put forth. And for us as Team Modern, I think we very, very closely align ourselves with what the 3x3 model depicts. We'll do a deeper dive into the 3x3 model, and we'll take it from there. And Sharda will talk about the OECD compass. So Sharda, over to you.
So friends, before we kind of move on to understanding the various elements or dimensions of the learning compass, here's a short video that we would like you to watch, which kind of describes the various elements in a very pictorial manner. So do let me know in case sound doesn't work.
Just as a compass orients travelers, the OECD Learning Compass indicates how students can navigate through an uncertain and rapidly changing ecosystem to help shape the future we want. It is an evolving learning framework that helps create a common language and understanding about broad education goals. Co-created by policymakers, researchers, school leaders, teachers, and students from around the world, the OECD Learning Compass defines the competencies, made up of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values, that students need to fulfill their potential and to contribute to the well-being of their communities and the planet. When a student holds the Learning Compass, he or she is exercising agency, the capacity to set a goal, reflect, and act responsibly to effect change, to act rather than be acted upon. But the student is not alone in this. He or she is surrounded by peers, parents, teachers, and the community, all of whom interact with and guide the student towards well-being. The Learning Compass shows that students need some core foundations before they can set off towards well-being. These include not only literacy and numeracy, but also data and digital literacy, physical and mental health, and social and emotional foundations. To shape their future and the future of society, learners need to develop certain transformative competencies. These are defined as the ability to create new value, reconcile tensions and dilemmas, and take responsibility for their own actions. These competencies are developed through a cyclical learning process, anticipating, acting, reflecting. As learners become more adaptive and reflective and take actions accordingly, they continually improve their way of thinking. While there may be many visions of the future we want, the well-being of society is a shared destination. The OECD Learning Compass orients learners of all ages towards that better future.
So thank you friends for listening to that video. And I hope you all have made some notes around all the elements that the OECD Learning Compass 2030 kind of alludes us to. And some of it is definitely not new because the Learning Compass is a fruit of research of various other frameworks, that some of the frameworks that we just listed and many more. So they have kind of distilled that information for us and have tried to identify what are the various components that we need as educators to plan into our curriculum. Not that these are additional elements that you need to plan for with the existing core foundations, which they feel and they firmly believe that it is not that we have to separate this knowledge element, whether literacy, numeracy, away from these skills. They have to be taught in together, integrated manner. And that's how the core foundations have to be planned in the schools. The transformative competencies that they talk about, creating new value, it's about as simple as we bringing in ideations or solutions for problems that we would kind of bring in context in our curriculum areas that we look at. And we will be able to see some of the examples as we go by in the upcoming slides. And talking about taking responsibility, as simple as, in case I have an issue in the classroom or at home or in my community, what kind of responsibility can I take? What action can I take as an individual is something that we need to build in into our curriculum areas. As simple as the amount of e-waste that gets generated was taken up by an individual as an action, and said that these batteries are just getting dumped in the ocean or maybe in the landfills. How about ensuring that these get collected in a systematic way and are recycled for a better purpose? And that's how children are taking simple initiatives like this, or even it may be the environment groups that you have in your schools. Those are the ones that we kind of want to bring in more into our curriculum areas and integrate it in that manner. And that definitely builds in student agency. And learning, OECD Learning Compass 2030 strongly believes that student agency is what will drive all of these competencies as well. My friend here, Sydney, will definitely bring in the other aspect, which is the anticipation, action, reflection cycle. So over to you, Sydney.
Thanks, Shraddha. So friends, the anticipation, action, reflection cycle, also known as the AAR cycle, is one that really excites us as a school, because over the last couple of years, we have strategically planned to, transact it and make it a living, breathing way of functioning and working at Modern. It's a simple cycle. It's a cycle that's iterative, that deepens thinking in children, that gets them to act intentionally based on knowledge structures that they have developed and learned and imbibed over time. The reason I want to take a minute to reflect on this as well is because it links so well to the example I gave you in the beginning of the Museum of the Future having that experiential learning opportunity for children. They have a mission. They've got to solve the problem. It could be an individual problem, a social problem, or a global problem. And really, if you think back to what I mentioned, revolution in education will come slowly. It's small steps like this where we take the cycle that the OECD is recommending as one of the elements of the learning compass, build it into our teaching, learning, which deepens understanding, which deepens reflection, which deepens thinking, that will bring gradual and exponential change to how children learn in the future and how they can take just knowledge, but then adapt it to their everyday lives for the better of themselves, their societies, and the world of which they are a part.
Thank you, Sydney.
Sydney, do you want to share the, that's, I know, your favorite model as well, so.
Yeah. So, friends, there are so many models out there really, and it's not that we're promoting a specific model over others, but it's the ones that resonate highly and deeply with us that we are sharing with you today. And one of those are the 3x3 model by Punya Mishra and Kirsten Kruelich. So if you look at that screen, there are 9 domains and 3 main areas that they seem to have culled out of their surveys of many educators over a long period of time. At the top, you have the fundamental knowledge, which is core to everything that we do. That's always going to be part and parcel of our education systems. But I think the focus being on meta and humanistic knowledge. What do we do with the knowledge that we have learned? How can children take the knowledge that they have learned and then use it in creative, innovative ways, using critical thinking, using problem solving, using those key skills of communication, also known as the 4 C's in many models, but then using it in a way in which impacts their world, their experiences, and their life. And so it is one of the models that made an impact on us because it fit our philosophy for education and it fit what we were trying to achieve with the children. There is another animation I think that's going to come up now that will sort of show you what the model proposes. It says foundational knowledge is the what we need to know. Meta knowledge is what do we do or how do we act on intentionally the information that we have at our disposal, and how do we align it with our values, with our understanding of people, the relationships we share, and to make the world a better place, to make life better for people, to identify and empathize with problems that exist around us. Every school that we know of is using sustainable development goals at this point. So aligning everything that we are doing with a research-based model that echoes our education philosophy, I think is the way forward for the next part of education. Sorry, I wanted to talk. So if you think of what I just said in a visual format, in a traditional curriculum, Charter, can we have those animations, please? In a traditional curriculum, information and data takes precedence over everything else. But, we were watching, I think it was, who was the video we were watching, Charter, the TED Talk video just now, even the afternoon? I forget the name of the person, but he referred to Google as being the greatest educational technology that has ever existed. And that sat with me for a minute because Google is, so common. But the point is everything that children need to know is available to them at their fingertips. So if we flip our curriculum and allow our curriculum to be guided by using that information, applying that information for children to act intentionally towards an objective or a goal, we would have flipped how children learn going forward. And this is not to be confused with the flipped classroom where you give children information ahead of time and then get them to do activities. That's a totally different concept. But what we're talking about here is taking away the stress and the emphasis on knowledge to making it more applicable in their everyday experiences and to their own contexts.
Thank you, Sydney. This kind of alludes us to look at as to why this kind of a flipping has happened and why it should happen. So the digital revolution definitely kind of aided this. But prior to that, there has been a lot of research in understanding what is the demand of the future. It's not that they've looked at the future in the 21st century. They did anticipate what would be in the 20th century as well. So the graph that you see here on the left is comparing the kind of tasks which are usually kind of classified into routine and non-routine, and how their demand has changed over time. And this data is definitely as of 2009, but on the right we will definitely show you what Andreas from OECD will kind of allude us to the recent understanding of the demand for more non-routine, interpersonal as well as cognitive or analytical tasks that has been there. So just give me a minute to play the video.
The driving sources are not so difficult to discern. Now, once again, the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test diminish in importance. Now, if you can explain what you do in the form of a formula, you're going to have a computer doing it better elsewhere tomorrow. Now, so routine cognitive skills are declining in their relevance now. That's a fundamental challenge for many of our education systems. Technology-intensive tasks are rising in importance. You put the two things together and you have the future of work. It's actually not rocket science. It's something that actually, when you understand those drivers, quite easy.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I think the video kind of ended abruptly. So it's not definitely, very difficult to understand that this is what we need in the future, but I think it's more of our planning that we need to kind of take it forward in the curriculum and in schools. So over to Mrs. Kambata for the next part of the slide.
The driving.
Thank you, Sharda. Friends, we've heard so much about the different models. We've unpacked some of the models as we said we would, and like we've said, it's whatever our takeaways are, what resonates with us, the philosophy of the school and what we do. And so you might think, so what's in my toolkit? What's in my toolbox? What sort of instructional systems do I have? And teachers, believe me when I tell you, we have it all. It's just leveraging what you have, tweaking it to suit purpose. What you do in primary won't work for middle, what you do in middle may not work for the senior section of the school. But if it's purposefully designed and it's purposefully crafted, then I think as practitioners in the classroom, knowing the research that you have, looking at trend analysis, making an educated guess, just finding out from colleagues across the world what works from them and what doesn't. We have the largest set of I'm sorry, my computer is playing up. Can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. We have the largest set of industry experts among ourselves if we only reach out, we have an entire community out there that we can use. So I think I'm going to request Sydney to come in and talk about the power of pedagogy, what you truly are experts at, teachers.
So teachers, I think it's important for me to say this. A lot of what we are presenting is the ideal. It's what we should aspire for and hope for. But at the grassroots level, I think it's teachers and educators and educational leaders who know best what works or does not work for their school or their institution. So it's important to know and be aware of everything that's out there, but be discerning and distill what will or can work or can be tried in your context. And I think one of the easiest ways to approach change, incremental change towards what we are hoping to achieve, is by re-looking at our pedagogy, because there is power in the pedagogy. And there are three models that we've decided to share with you today. So one is the inquiry approach, the other is ideation focused, and the other is problem solving. And if you've listened closely to everything that we've talked about, it's sort of a running theme through this presentation, because at the end of the day, it does come down to what teachers can deliver in the classroom and how that changes the educational experience for their children. So it is in our experience that inquiry in the classroom, ideation and problem solving approaches help children develop all these key skills that we are making educated guesses about, and educated conjecture will be required for the future. Of course, we've got research to back that as well. These are all these organizations have identified these skills, and we believe that inquiry, design thinking, problem-based scenarios are what develop children's thinking and skills going forward. I want to show you Modern's approach to developing all of these skills. So it has been a systematic approach that we've adopted. What you see on the top are our primary offerings, where we have STEAM projects, we have a PYP action component and a PYP exhibition, allowing children at an early age in the PYP to develop key skills of critical thinking, ideation, problem solving, and empathy. As they progress into the middle school, they have their challenge-based learning, or CBL. In fact, we just wrapped ours last week and we were amazed by how children know the things they know, because so much of what they talk about or reflect on deeply or are moved by are not necessarily things that have been transacted in the classroom, because the knowledge base is already out there for them to access and use. How we leverage it is through CBL, giving them opportunities to use that knowledge in practical scenarios, getting to problems and solutions for all the things that you see. As they progress into the senior school, they have Project Prism and a research colloquium, and of course the extended essay, CAS and SUPW components of the school as well. The point we wanted to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that this cannot be a flash in the pan approach for schools. It has to be systematic. It has to be incrementally implemented, sustained, reflected on, changed. So all the skills we want the children to develop are also skills teachers need to develop in how they transact learning in the classroom. There's a comment in the chat that says, how are teachers prepared to navigate the future? And I think there's two parts to that, right? There's one part that school leaders have to question and study and reflect on deeply. So much of how we are in the classroom depends on how we are and what we believe learning to be. Do we value knowledge or do we value skills, or do we see that it's the balance of both that brings true learning? So I think on one side, it's school leaders who will have to lead transformative learning experiences for their teams. And I think there's a huge incumbent purpose for us as teachers and educators to develop ourselves, to be aware of what's going on around us, to see into the future, so to speak, and get all of those things to whatever degree we can into our toolkit, which is what we're talking about. So this approach is one of those skills that we can take forward.
Thank you, Sid. Teachers, I also wanted to add the other element, because I'm sure that when you see these approaches or the kind of examples that we're giving here, back in your mind, probably you would be thinking, how do I manage this with the amount of curriculum that I have to cover with the given fixed time available in one academic year? And what about those external assessments that we need to ensure that our children are prepared for in the same time? So teachers, here it is. Please question the curriculum outcome that you are looking at, the knowledge area. Why is the learner learning this? Why is this part of the curriculum in grade 4, in grade 8, grade 10? If it is so, and you are able to identify that purpose, take that purpose to your children. Make it more relevant for them, for their learning experiences. Make it more contextual, as just Sydney alluded, the social, local, global, community level kind of an approach. And when they are able to make those connections, join those dots, children will be able to bring up the questions that they have in their mind, which will definitely, kind of be supported with the knowledge of the content that's coming from the curriculum itself, which is the base or which is the foundation. And no approach, no 21st century framework denies that the core foundation of literacy, numeracy, social studies is not essential. It is essential because it is on these that the children will be able to drive and drive with agency, because only when it becomes relevant and contextual for them in the world scenario kind of a format, very experiential, that's when it'll be easier, and it will be more of, rather than just pure student agency, more of co-agency. Make children part of your curriculum planning as well. Make children understand the reasons why we are doing this, and then they are able to bring in their lens as a learner into that lessons, and thereby it makes your role as a facilitator much easier than that of just delivering knowledge and content.
Thank you, Sharda. We often call Sharda the queen of curriculum and queen of everything. She's just a fountainhead of knowledge. But I am very mindful of time, and I think one of my roles as being the moderator is to control the flow. And I'm going to skip very quickly through the next few slides so that we can pay emphasis on what we need to. There was a question that asked, the pre-questions that you all sent on really, why is the need for personalization? And I think the flow theory explains this beautifully. Mihali's flow theory from the 1970s is relevant today and is being quoted by educators. And if you look at this theory, it just says that if you match skills with difficulty of the task, then a child is in flow. And if your skill set is low and your difficulty level is very high, it leads to anxiety and frustration. But if your skill set is high, the task difficulty is high, they're passionate about what they do, then they zoom and they're in complete state of immersion where they're oblivious of time. And I'm going to very quickly skip through how that scaffolding can be done. There is a whole theory around how scaffolding needs to be done. I'm going to jump to the next slide very quickly, and I'm going to skip it because the next slide demonstrates or just explains, the various choice boards that you have at your disposal. So we will get a copy of this presentation, but I'm going to zoom ahead and skip that. And well, it's that perfect teach, learn, fit, in the 21st century, where teachers themselves are learners. And when that happens, how wonderful is that? Because the students know that, it's not them alone that are figuring things out. It's their teachers as well. And try learning something from your students. They might just surprise you. The pyramid has reversed and it's no longer just knowledge. Knowledge and understanding is important, but that's not all there is to it. I'm going to request Sydney and Sharda to spend exactly 2 minutes on the next 3 slides. That's your challenge.
Okay. Thank you, Nargis. So, friends, this is an example of structuring your learning task integrated with the 21st century skills and bringing in the relevant context for the local or the community level scenarios. So here you see the description of which skill that we're focusing on and the relevant math syllabi or math curriculum outcome that we are looking at. And the topic area or the concept is that of looking at the shape, but in measurement, so area and perimeter. So how can learning area and perimeter be made more contextual, made more relevant for them is through this kind of a design task that we assign our students. So looking at a parking lot and ensuring that they are able to design a specific set of dimensions to have the parking lot designed in that manner. And if you would like to bring in technology, you can have various apps or any other animated options available for them. So that kind of redefines your entire task. If they wish to kind of collaborate on another level at another space or another location remotely, so then virtual kind of collaboration happens and children are able to problem solve parking space issues for other places in the country where crowding and population is a concern or space is a concern. Another example that here we would like to take is on the creativity evolution.
Sharda,
Yes.
I'm going to skip the example. So I think you just zip through this and let Sydney speak to the last slide. I'm really mindful of time.
Okay. Yeah.
And the worst thing you can do is hold teachers back after hours. So we're really going to try and meet that 4 o'clock deadline. Sydney, over to you.
Sure. So I think I'm not going to go through the slide and the contents of the slide, but a point I do want to make, and it comes out of a conversation I was having with a parent the other day in our MYP class, and she asked, why does MYP have to be open-ended, and why does MYP have to be about critical thinking only? And I think that's something to mull on and ensure that everyone understands that it's not about making things, airy and lofty. It's about rooting your learning outcomes in a way and in a manner in which that develops skills, that develops thinking, and challenges children to think differently about the knowledge that they have acquired. Making it relatable is, I think, the key in making these approaches to teaching learning successful in the classroom. So think, how does a child relate to the concept that I'm teaching? And if you can design your outcomes and design your experiences in a way in which engages the child, I think we would have achieved what we wanted to.
Thank you, Sydney.
Teachers, you'll find more examples on this in this book, which has been recently published by OECD, which talks about these kind of contextual learning tasks for students.
Thank you, Sharda. I'm going to ask you to skip this slide as well and just take it to the next one. Teachers, these are 2 young students. Here's a young lad called Kaivalya from Dubai College, and this is Adit Palicha from GEMS Modern. These 2 youngsters graduated in 2020, got admission into Stanford. Our biggest grouse is that they're being called Stanford dropouts and not students from GEMS Modern and Dubai College. But these young men went to India and they decided to take what do you call that? A what year? Gap year.
Yeah.
And a gap year. And they worked on a series of things, but the most successful one being Zepto. And Zepto today is so successful. This is an old evaluation of 200 to 300 million. They've reached 500 million now. I believe Zomato offered to buy them out at 500 million US dollars. And they said, come back to us when we've touched $1 billion. That's the confidence of these youngsters. If you all remember, Adit was the young lad who set out the GoPool app. And we believe that, whether it's Dubai College or whether it's GEMS Modern, these youngsters in all of our schools are being equipped with the 21st century skills that they need. So you're definitely doing something very right, teachers, all of you. We just have to keep ourselves abreast with the latest, what's happening, keep up with our children, more importantly than anything else, and just give them the wings to be the wind beneath their wings and let them fly. And with that, I'm going to invite Ms. Stephanie Price to come in with her magical link with students on the 21st century skills.
Wow, thank you.
Sharda, you can stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Nageesh and Sharada and Sydney, for that wonderful session that you've just presented. I think from what you've shared today, it's really clear that learning environments are transforming, and they are transforming because we all need to be equipped, whether we're an educator, whether we're a learner, even as parents. So if the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us that we can still learn, and there's more than one way of doing that. So I would just like to take a couple of minutes just to share a program from KHDA that's something that's available for students, and I will just share my screen. Okay, here we go. just very briefly, just wanted to give you some information about this initiative that we set up around 6 years ago, and it's called the Dubai Saturday Club. So basically, this is a fun, informal education program, and it's designed for 12 to 15-year-olds. Why we created this was mainly because we were in contact with a number of people from the community who were coming to us saying, you know, we recognize that there's a gap from when students leave school or leave university and they enter the world of work, and they're not exposed to future careers and they don't have those opportunities. So we found that there was definitely a need for a program like this. And so we created this to introduce future careers and enhance 21st century skills with the aim of developing their passion and their purpose. So how do we do this? We do this through free workshops. That's one of the key highlights of the club. They're completely free, and they're hosted by local universities, social entrepreneurs, professionals, people from the community who are really passionate about sharing their career pathways, giving students an insight into those future careers. And the kind of subject areas that we focus on tend to be around things to do with creativity, entrepreneurship, innovation, well-being, collaboration, sustainability. So many of the topics that you've covered earlier on. Registration, as I said, it's completely free. We have lots of details about upcoming sessions on the website. The season for the Saturday clubs runs every academic year, and they run from October through to March, most Saturdays during that period of time. And we have two that are coming up on the 26th of February. One is around photography, which is perspective photography with Nikon, and the other one is Be a Scientist with 3M. So these two organizations are very passionate about connecting with this particular age group to give them an insight into what future careers they can embark on using their particular passion. So I hope that this has been a useful segue in terms of what's available for students. As I said, they're completely free. And if you feel that this is something that would be of benefit or of interest to your students, please feel free to share details. They can find out all about the upcoming sessions on the Dubai Saturday Club website. I'll pop that in the chat afterwards as well. So thank you once again for allowing me to take a few moments just to share the platform details.
Thank you, Stephanie. And you know, some of our students have benefited from these Saturday clubs, and if they're, I'm one of your biggest advocates for the Saturday club. So to everyone listening in, I think it's definitely a Saturday morning well spent. It's still on a Saturday morning, right? It's not on a Sunday morning now. With the new weekend?
Yes, it is still on a Saturday morning. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Teachers, there really are no questions in the chat. I think one of the comments was around, I think some of the comments that were there have already been responded to and answered. The EIP is the Entrepreneurship Innovation Program at Modern. And like Sydney said, it's a very carefully considered progression pathway for the students. If any of you would like to have any additional information on you know, some of the matter that we've shared, we're more than happy to have the conversation with you. Please reach out. The presentation will be shared by Maya. If there are no burning questions, then like good educators, we will say thank you very much for attending the session. It's been a pleasure. And as always, whenever we present, we try and learn. And there's been lots of learning during our preparation for this webinar. So thanks to the KHDA WhatWorks team. I have a complaint, and that is whoever presents, they put in a lot of effort, for these presentations. So please do share with your colleagues that, honor the presenters by attending. We've got a fairly good attendance, and I do know some people have messaged me saying that our leadership teams are in the conference room watching. So that would be 15 logins or 10 logins instead of 1. But not only for this session, but for all What Works sessions. I think whoever presents is preparing well. It's a wealth of information. People work hard to come together to present it. So do honor that and spread the news, spread the joy, and avail of these What Works sessions. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Shada. Thank you, Malini. Thank you, Stephanie, for that little dollop of, it was a wonderful present at the end. Thank you very much, Maya. Have a good evening, everyone.